So ForGEDI MOOC was developed in collaboration with the University of Padova, Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and University of Malcolm under former task force on gender equality in forestry of the International Union of Forest Research Organizations. UFRO is actually a global network that brings together forest scientists, institutes, and universities, as well as other stakeholders, to advance forest research and promote solutions for sustainable forest management. With over 630 organizations around the world, UFRO actually fosters international collaboration to address some of the world's most pressing challenges related to environment and also society, including those that are related to equity and inclusion in forest-related sectors. So starting in 2022, for 2 years, 42 people from 30 organizations actually worked together and designed the course called ForGEDI MOOC to bridge the gaps in traditional forestry education. We are proud that so far we have reached over 2,300 learners and have exceptionally low dropout rate of around 3%. So we believe that this shows strong dedication to acquiring knowledge that is needed for more inclusive and accessible and reflective society that actually acknowledge the diverse realities that shape our forest. But after 2 years of running the course, we asked the question, is the course and the learning through it sufficient for making the change? So I'm happy that we will come to that answer through the reflection of our keynote speaker, Dr. Janette Bulkan, who will talk about the role of knowledge in promoting gender equity. Janette is Associate Professor in the Department of Forest Resource Management in the Faculty of Forestry of University of British Columbia, and she is a member of Governing Council of the Commonwealth Forestry Association, as well as the Advisory Board of the Green Institute of University of Guyana. Janette is also the coordinator of UFRO Working Party on Indigenous People and Forest Landscape, as well as a member of our ForGEDI UFRO task force. Welcome, Janette, and thank you for accepting our invitation to act as guest speaker. During the keynote presentation and also during the reflexive session, we will do our best to save the time for questions and answers from the audience. So make sure to put your comments and questions into the design Q&A space at the mid bottom of your Zoom screen. Our colleague here, Cassie Diazzo, will keep the eye on that part and make sure that the questions reach the speakers. After the keynote speech of Dr. Janette Bulkan, we are going to dive into the reflections of ForGEDI MOOC coordinators, and we will have here Ida Wallin to speak about the idea behind MOOC creation and the coordination of the week one that provided basic knowledge on GEDI in our course. Then we will follow with Dr. Susanne Koch, who provided contribution on inequalities in forest science workforce and work very closely with Ida in designing week one. We will then move to Dr. Rocío Melina García, who provided case study on forest bureaucracies in Argentina, to our week two, which focused on GEDI barriers. And we will hear in 3 minutes also from Kelly Cooper, the founder and president of the Center of Social Intelligence. I had the opportunity to collaborate directly with her in week 3. And also I'm looking forward to her new book that is actually coming out tomorrow called Emboldened Warriors. So I invite you to check that too also. And last but not least, we will have the opportunity to learn about learner experience from Philip Chambers, who actually completed our course. And he is a doctoral researcher of University of Eastern Finland and also one of co-coordinators of our ForGEDI UFRO task force. So welcome Ida, Susanne, Rocío, Kelly, and Philip to the panel. So without further taking the time, I would like to now invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Janette Bulkan, to share her presentation and talk. Please, Jen.
Thank you, Todora. I don't know if everyone can see my screen.
We do, Janet, but we see the presentation in your, let's say, not presenting mode. If you can click at the bottom of your Power presentation, yes, maybe it works. No,
Does it
now
work?
we see, yeah, now we see now your presenter slides.
Oh, so I should.
Can you click on the top? You should see use slideshow. Could you try that one? Not next to it, right? Yes. Let's see if that works. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Todora. So, hello, everyone. As Todora mentioned, my name is Janette Bulkan, and today I'd like to acknowledge I'm speaking from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people of British Columbia, and I am aware that they are also in Indigenous peoples in Canada and globally, subject to some of the inequities and inequalities that are the topic of our ForGEDI course and our discussions today. So Todora has already talked about this massive open online course, and that we are here because it's the second anniversary. Ida and Todora are among the coordinators, which benefited from this global band of persons who made it such a useful and vital part of promoting gender equity. The key point I would like to make is that whether the graduates from this course can use their knowledge to advance gender equity, gender equality, depends on the societies in which they live and work. How to advance my slide. So here are my key points. That knowledge, as embodied in the course ForGEDI, is necessary, but it's not sufficient to promote gender equity. Now, what is key is the governance, the rules, which operate at the societal level, at higher levels of the country or region. That's the determining factor in whether or how knowledge like knowledge of gender equity or how to promote gender equity is valued or discounted, devalued in a society. And so therefore, after gaining knowledge, individual knowledge, there's a need to act together, support others, to force recognition and promotion of gender equality, gender equity. And I suggest finally that we can take a page out of the book of Indigenous peoples who globally have been able or work to overcome their minority status in their countries and their small numbers by engaging in multi-level and multi-scale alliances. So I'm quickly going to speak a little about how I understand knowledge, reminding everyone this audience needs no reminder, but perhaps later in the YouTube channel, there are persons who will not know quite what we mean by gender and the idea of production of knowledge, reproduction, and disruption. So we can think of knowledge, or I think of knowledge in three broad categories: centralized, oral, and practical or experiential knowledge. Centralized knowledge being, for example, the ForGEDI course, where an individual is part of that study, part of the course, and then at the end, if successful, is issued a certificate of completion of success. That's with centralized. It's to deal with literacy, very formal, and institutions. Oral knowledge is more diffuse, passed down through, encoded in stories, songs, art. We know it as indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge across indigenous and traditional societies. And then there is practical knowledge, what late James Scott called métier. And this has to do with skills, wisdom, muscle memory, what works, very often the skills, for example, of a farmer or an artisan. What about gender? So here I take a quote from Heckert, who describes gender as a system of categorization. And that this system of classification or categorization permeates every aspect of culture and society and is closely intertwined with other categories and other hierarchies like race, class, sexuality. So gender is socially determined, and more recently, in the last few decades, has broken free from the binary constraints of just thinking of men and women. So gender equality, which we aim for in, for example, a course like ForGEDI, aims for no hierarchical ordering, so flat, recognition of equal rights for all genders. It's rights-based construct, not universally accepted, but implicit already in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which goes back to the 1948. Women, category of women looms large when we think about gender because it's encoded in historical systems of sexual difference, encoded in many languages. And these two categories, men and women, are often generally socially constituted. And in many countries still, both in industrial and in non-industrial countries, are positioned in relationships of hierarchy. Someone is higher, one is lower, also of a bit antagonistic, and as well a recognition of comparative biological strengths and weaknesses. A key insight in thinking about gender equity and gender equality comes from, the great Karl Marx, who from the 1840s, 1850s, really began to think about production. Who controls production and the accumulation of capital? And Marx argued that the only source of capital's value was exploitation of labor, and that production and control of labor was absolutely essential and key to capitalism. And also, Marx and related Marxist thinkers moved on to think about the relations of production. And in those ways in which production is ordered, in many societies, there is this subordination of women and exploitation and control of women's labor. And feminists in particular, Marx also showed that capitalism reproduced itself generation after generation through formal state apparatuses like encoded in law, in religion, in the media, but also in more informal, everyday apparatuses like school and family that allow these relations of production to continue over generations and centuries. So, some key advances for gender equity, I argue, come from beginning in 1975, the work of Dalla Costa and her collaborator Selma James. And one of Dalla Costa's key insights, which is in this article, Women and the Subversion of the Community, was to look again at the role of housework and reproductive work of women. Up until then, many feminists thought of housework as backward, keeping women behind, and that they should just simply aim to be out in the workplace. Dalla Costa argued that housework and reproductive work, having babies and produce, are a precondition or necessary for capitalist production. Without that work done in the home, there would be no labor power reproduced, and so therefore you could have no capital accumulation. And so they argue that this usually unpaid and work which performed where women are walled into their homes, where they're subordinated to men within the family or within the society, had to be rethought. And they worked from the mid-1970s for the Wages for Housework campaign, successful in some countries, but still an ongoing process. By the 1980s, ecofeminists, I argue, or I've read, I believe, really defined this idea of reproduction. It's not only they argued producing babies for the next generation, but that in all societies, there are individuals, there are genders who are intimately involved in reproducing the ecosystem or the environments in which they live. Food, gathering, collecting, caring for territory, and passing on knowledge. So thinking of reproduction beyond just the next generation of people. Knowledge is as embodied and encoded in ForGEDI can be disruptive. So we've known when these ideas, these societally created divisions between men and women have been set aside during the Great Wars, in prisons, for example, or pushed aside by the work of feminists and worker movements who no longer break down those barriers between what's considered feminine, what's considered masculine, and knowledge being seen as valuable, more as valuable as the strength which one gender tends to have over another. And so this idea of women as a fixed or invariant natural grouping has broken down. So we can ask the question, what's the relationship between knowledge and gender equity? And I think one can argue that the way knowledge is accepted and valued really depends on the social organization of the society in which the knowledge holder is and how knowledge is valued and expressed there. And many argue, many thinkers and theorists, that this difference between production, means of production, and reproduction of the family, reproduction of the ecosystem and society, the environment, will cease to exist in any place, in any society where people, whatever gender they are, have control over the means of their reproduction. They get to choose. They get to have equality and equity in the reproduction of their society. Which brings us to governance. The structures, the implications of governance is who makes the rules, how are those rules passed on or embodied or implemented in a society, and the place of knowledge in those rules. So we know that very few societies are discrete, self-contained, perhaps only indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation can be said to be outside of our universalizing world with contact with market economy. And so in these changing contexts, how governance is enacted at the very local level in communities, at regional levels, at national and international levels, really determines the place of knowledge. Is that governance enabling? Is it transparent? Is it fair? Or is it oppressive? Is it non-transparent? Is it inequitable? And that really, for me, is key in the possibilities of ForGEDI in changing the way forests are governed in our world. In communal systems, as we know, everyone who belongs, a recognized member of the group, has a right to be counted in that group, has a right to exist within that group's sphere of land ownership or their practices. Where these communal groups control resources, there's also, yes, a recognition that men, women, other genders hold differentiated knowledge, and they are recorded respect because of their knowledge as traditional healers or shamans or some other kind of special knowledge. And one example that really, for me, illustrates this, there are many in the book called Women as Stewards of Forests, co-edited by Ida, who's here, and Todora, who here already, is this example from the Democratic Republic of the Congo with the Bafoussende people. And in this chapter of the book, we learn that the Bafoussende have a patriarchal system of land ownership. So only men get to inherit land. So for women in this society, as in others, a single woman can labor, but the fruits of her labor on the land belong to first her father and the group the family she is born into, and then the fruits of her labor belong to her husband and his family. She's never allowed by their traditions to own land herself. And so we can see this as a barrier to equity, to equality in forest governance, even in communally organized societies. So how would we move beyond this? And I think we can perhaps agree, particularly in our destabilized world today, that when we can't look to leaders for leading us out into good governance, that it is action of all genders, of people everywhere, to push for recognition and promotion of our ideas, our insistence on gender equity and equality. Back to the Bafoussende and the DRC. Here, women are being slowly, as the chapter says, surreptitiously, quietly being supported to become landowners, to aim for land ownership. And that's through external support, helping women to be able to grow cocoa on their farms, some farms that they are able to lease and then eventually buy. And through being able to sell the cocoa pods, they're able to gain some independence and reconfigure power relations in the society where previously they are consigned to a lower and lesser status with no control over their fruits of their labor. So in many countries in our world, which are under authoritarian rule, where patron-client systems operate, where only politically powerful cliques determine the role of knowledge in society, we can overcome that, I think, through courses like ForGEDI, by organizing and acting together to take these insights that we've learned about, that the 2,300 graduates have learned about, and making them visible. That's always easier if they're functioning labor unions, independent associations of workers. But even when those are not allowed to exist, even when associations are muzzled, we know increasingly, we can see that across the world, that people acting together from all genders are able to call power and decision-making authorities to account. And as they say, we're losing our fear. They do this, we worry now about social media. It's addictive. We worry about its impact on our younger generations, but it's also, on the flip side, allowing this untrammeled, unhindered expansion of the store of knowledge. And finally, I argue that we can really learn from Indigenous peoples to how to promote courses and knowledge like ForGEDI. So Indigenous peoples who have been oppressed globally on every continent, subject to genocidal practices, have their land taken away, still hold very clear visions of their rights to their ancestral land, territory, and resources, LTR in the UNDRIP of 2007. Many Indigenous peoples all over the world articulate this idea: we're still here, we still survive. We assert the right to govern ourselves, to self-determination. They make decisions in common. They hold to more or less agreed subsets of knowledge holders, yes, but they act in unity. There's one body of knowledge called OCAP, where just increasingly they demand the right to control their indigenous knowledge. And Indigenous peoples engage in this multi-level and multi-scale alliances, so that even though in many countries, Indigenous peoples are a small minority of their national populations and also marginalized through racism and through the social structures to not have a large voice, nevertheless, they network and are represented at regional, global levels. Many have taken their governments to court and won recognition of their rights to land, territory, resources, self-government. So can knowledge promote gender equity? Absolutely, I think, yes. It's a key ingredient, but I would argue by itself, it is not sufficient, that we need to mobilize and act together to force recognition and change and make courses like ours ForGEDI part of the diffusion, the force for change in the world we live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janette, for this thought-provoking presentation. I am wondering if there are questions from the audience or any other reflections. If not, I would have one, maybe, as the time still allows us. Janette, I was wondering, you talked a lot about the knowledge and valuing different types of knowledge or categories of knowledge. In your experience, what kind of knowledge is valued most in forestry, and who decided upon that existing hierarchy?
Well, it depends on who owns the forests, I would argue, Todora. So if, for example, it's who gets to make the rules, whether it's the state, if it's a country with large state claims to ownership of forest, then they will, the state institutions will make those rules. Forest is owned by a corporation. They get to determine what operates. But then, of course, if that forest corporation or leaseholders belong to an independent scheme like PEFC or FSC, then they voluntarily follow the rules set by a third party.
Thank you, Janet, very much for this answer. Yes, indeed, and we did a lot of efforts to make the knowledge that we, let's say, co-created with MOOC development, make available and open access to everybody. And we are still managing to make it open access. So thank very much also to Nordic Forest Research, who is kindly sponsoring the course for 2 years, and also previous sponsors as SLO Global and FSC International and University of Padova. But now, being aware of the time, I would like to turn on to our panelists, because each of them played unique role in the development of the MOOC. And here I would like first to welcome Ida as one of the co-coordinators of ForGEDI MOOC, but also the person who, let's say, came up with the idea and acted upon the need. So Ida, we heard from Janet that knowledge alone is not sufficient to drive gender equity, and that the value depends on how it is recognized within systems. And we work within our forestry educational system. So when you first envisioned the course, what kind of knowledge did you actually want to include in forestry education?
I think the knowledge we wanted to, very easy question, Todora. Thank you so much for posting it. I don't think we thought so much about knowledge. We thought about, we need to talk about it. This what we often talk about, the awareness raising. And I mean, that is to bring knowledge on the table, but it's different words. And sometimes we don't think about this as knowledge. It's a concept that brings a lot of other things. And I think what we wanted to bring was perspectives, that we felt that forestry education worldwide was lacking these perspectives, that they had a very one-sided way on looking on reality. And of course, you can call that knowledge or awareness. But I think what is important to see when it comes to ForGEDI, that it's not enough with knowledge, it's not enough with an idea. I really like what you were talking about, Janette, that this is a collaborative work. An idea is a seed that does not germinate, does not grow unless you have the right people around you, and people with their own competences and knowledge in order to bring it all together. So it's also a good example of how the diversity of knowledge come together in a beautiful way. For me, ForGEDI is that little seed that I found the fertile ground some years ago, and especially teaming up with Todora and Stephen, and then finding the networks that we created through the previous task force within IUFRO, which was the kind of fertile soil that we had. And this idea could grow into something that is beautiful and hopefully also long-lasting as our trees and forests. So I think that's that we could, when we put that seed, maybe we didn't even know what kind of plant it was. We didn't know what it would grow into. We just wanted to have some kind of online course. But then it grew, and more people joined and watered the idea, and it became this very diverse course that we see in the sense of bringing knowledge from all the continents and collaborators. So I think sometimes it's also good to not know, because it was also a lot of hard work. It was dedicated work, and I think it's very beautiful to think about the saying that you sometimes hear. It's difficult to, you often overestimate what you can do within a short time span of a month or a year, but you often underestimate what you can do within 5 years. And ForGEDI has been growing for more than 5 years now, and it's definitely surprised how much each one of us could do and how even more we could do together to bring this all together. And that's the beauty of this, that is still growing, right? So we don't know what will be in 5 years. And of course, I can have a vision, or we can have a vision together, but it also depends on who else is on board. And I'm looking forward to that journey very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida, very much. Indeed, it was an amazing, and it's still amazing to look how the idea brought different people together, different knowledges together, different experiences. And I believe we were lucky to gather over 40 people, 40 individuals together to contribute to different parts of the MOOC. So today we have also with us Dr. Susanne Koch. Welcome, Susanne. She contributed to week 1 of our course and provided the contribution to show the basic situation and understanding of how gender and geography actually shape the scientific knowledge, working closely with Ida in week 1. So Susanne, you had to translate very specific knowledge and your sociological, if I may say, perspective into the ForGEDI MOOC. So how did this approach of presenting these inequalities in forestry sector actually resonated with global and diverse audience? How did you manage to make that happen?
Thank you very much, Todora, for this question. I approached my contribution from my perspective and position as a sociologist of science. So to give you a background in my work, I look at how scientific knowledge, like academic knowledge, is produced, and how social structures such as gender imbalances or global inequalities shape that process of knowledge production. So in my work, I adopt a kind of a meta perspective on science itself, and forest research has become my main empirical field of study over the past years. The MOOC was then a great opportunity for me to share the results of my work, not only with my peers in science studies, but really directly with the people in the field I investigate. And the challenge then was to not only show to them what kind of inequalities exist, but also to get across why these inequalities matter. And so I tried then to do this in 2 steps. So first, I pointed to patterns of inequality that become visible when you look into, for instance, scientific publishing, into the composition of global academic networks or international scientific conferences. So several studies here using different kind of quantitative data clearly show that knowledge production in forestry is geographically concentrated in the global north, and that men still dominate key positions that shape research agendas and discourses. Then in a second and maybe even more important step, I explained why this is an issue. So not only from a normative perspective, when you would argue that science should be a space of equal opportunities, but also from an epistemic perspective, because knowledge is situated. And here I draw on a key insight from my field, from science studies, developed particularly by feminist SDS scholars who have shown that knowledge is always shaped by the context and the conditions under which it is generated. So what it means is that the questions we ask, whether as a forest scientist or whether as a science scholar, which research topics we consider important, the methods we use, and how we interpret our findings are always shaped by our social and professional identities and locations. So put simply, what we know about forests depend on who produces knowledge from where. As a result, gender and geographic inequalities matter because they impact on what we come to know about forests and potentially also what we miss out to see if these inequalities are not addressed. And to make this step in the MOOC meaningful, I invited learners to connect to these ideas, to their own contexts and experiences, and share these. And I was really struck by the reactions, particularly to this idea of situated knowledge and how it resonated with many learners. So a man replied in the comments, I quote, "That thing with the situated knowledge really woke me up," end quote. And so for me, seeing how a science scholar's perspective really translated into these reflections and sparked discussions among the learners was one of the most rewarding aspects of contributing to the MOOC. And I'm very happy to have been part of building it with my contribution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Susanne. Indeed, so rewarding to see many positive comments on your step, but also other contributions. Also very useful to see some more critical ones. So we take into account all of that. You reflected briefly on the situated knowledge and the structures. And in week 2, exactly of the MOOC, we dedicated to understanding these gender barriers. And today with us, we also have Dr. Rogelja García, who actually worked with Stephen Wyatt in presenting the case on forest bureaucracies in Argentina and how they shape decision-making and legitimacy of institutions. So, Rogelja, welcome. And a question for you is, when bringing your case to the ForGEDI MOOC, what do you want most learners to understand about how these institutions and cultural dynamics actually influence whose knowledge and authority are actually recognized in practice on the ground?
Thank you, Todora. Well, first I want to mention I want to express my gratitude for, belonging to this network of qualified and committed persons, professionals. And yes, regarding the case study that I presented, as you mentioned, it has to do with authority and legitimacy. The main key message that I want learners to take from it is that the number in the gender representation is necessary, but not is necessary translated into equity. And this may seem obvious within this group, but it's not so obvious in other contexts, and it's really crucial in the design of institutional bodies. And in my particular case, I found myself in another field. I come from another field, and I went to the land in Patagonia in another context, and I found that the environmental secretary was represented by women, and the forest directory, in the other hand, was a male-dominant bureaucracy. And when I went to make my interviews with the settlers, they expressed that they didn't pay attention to the environmental secretary because women were like not an authority for them. And this really caught my attention, and during my study, I was somehow facing the ForGEDI barriers without the name, right? And then I came up more close to this field, and I found myself with this network. And in the MOOC also, there is week 2 that specifically deals with ForGEDI barriers and has a name for each of these barriers a woman face regarding gender and other disadvantaged groups. And it really helped me to put a name on things. And I think this is a great job of the organizers of the MOOC. First, to have in week 1 that Susanne talked about previously, like the concepts and the structure, right? In week 2, Stephen made a wonderful job also in taking the case study and structuring in each of the ForGEDI barriers with first gender, then the other disadvantaged group, and then some cases of asserting their place. And sometimes we only stay into yes, identifying the barriers. And this MOOC also has a week 3 that then the next panelist will speak about, but also what are the examples that we have for solutions to these problems. And I think it's a really complete MOOC. In my case, it was really also fruitful for me to translate my case study and to really translate it into an educational material that Stephen there also helped me to move forward. And for the learners, I think it has a really nice format also with, yes, some podcasts, some material in short text, videos. It's really interactive, really friendly for the user, and I think this is also something to highlight for this MOOC.
Thank you very much, Rocío, for sharing your experiences. Indeed, we did put Stephen a bit in the fire with asking him to come with a framework that can somehow be used with all case studies that represent different kinds of GEDI barriers. And it was a tough job. So thanks you very much, Stephen, for accepting this very demanding role. As Rocío mentioned, we have the week 3 in our MOOC, and moving from basic understanding through understanding barriers, at the end, we wanted to, let's say, wrap up the course in more positive manner and finish with strategies that could be used to advance and promote GEDI. And I'm truly happy that here today we have Kelly Cooper, who I collaborated closely in week 3, and she brought a very different, very practical perspective to our course, talking about workplace culture and lack of opportunities and how to deal with that in advancing GEDI. So welcome, Kelly. Thank you for joining us today. I was wondering, when you were bridging your practical experience and sharing that knowledge with us and presenting it in ForGEDI MOOC, what was the most important things for learners, in your opinion, to understand about how to move from recognizing inequality, knowing about inequality, to actually doing something and making change within the institutions and workplace cultures?
Thanks, Todora, for the question, and thanks everyone for being here today. It's a privilege to be here with you. I guess my quick answer to that is we have to be prepared for the resistance that is in our society, speaking to what Janette started us off with. It's with Free to Grow in Forestry, started in 2018 with a stakeholder group, of which Stephen was, I recruited Stephen to that. And it had public, private, not-for-profit, Indigenous and academic representatives on that committee across the country, as much male-female split as I could find. And together we created a new vision for the sector. We made some pretty serious progress, I would say, within the first 3 years of the initiative, so much so that we were committed to going, or were recommended to go forward, so we did. In the 4th year, we were faced with some resistance, let's say. And that resistance came from power structures. And that resistance came because the status quo was being threatened and challenged. And to Rocío's, sorry if I'm not saying her name right, point just made earlier, it's those structures that we're up against. And that's what I talk about in my next book, because I faced unprecedented resistance. And I talk about it in the book. I talk about how we have power structures that we need to shift, and we need to deal with it as individuals. And that's back to the point of what was contributing effectively with the MOOC that I brought forward, is the allyship piece is really critical, understanding the different ways to be an ally. And then secondly, understanding what resistance looks like and how to spot it early so you can navigate it. That's another big thing. And then understanding the whole point of what we've talked about here today, collaboration, and how fundamental that is as an inclusive leadership skill set. And the whole idea of transparency and respect and accountability. These are the things that I was promoting through Free to Grow, still am, but that aren't happening right now. Let's just say they're not happening. And it's not just with men, it's also women. So women who have been in the sector a very long time can often look like a woman but act like a man. And so we have to be aware. Back to earlier points by Ida, like we start with awareness, right? And that's what Ida started with, this whole idea of the MOOC. That's what I started with Free to Grow. But we go through it. What I was working through was a change management lens of awareness to create that desire for change, to create knowledge, which is what you guys are doing now. And then you're onboarding the abilities and the skills, and then the recognition. And if we can actually get through that framework, we've made some progress. Now, having said all that, I don't know if I'm out of time. I think what has happened with the MOOC is excellent. Like, you guys were amazing with how you coordinated it. It was awesome. And I think it's got a lot of value, and definitely we need it within the university system. But we have to be quite eyes wide open about people coming out of university and how that's met in reality. Because I hear from women all the time who are in the companies. Some are experiencing some progress, depends on where you are, but others are still witnessing the reality of the situation. And frankly, in North America, the rollback that we're facing. We have different circumstances here with tariffs on our country and other demands that push back conversations on gender that are seen as extra, when really they're fundamental, to my opinion. But they push back because everyone's like, oh, we got to hunker down and focus on the economy. So what they fail to realize is that women contribute diverse ideas on strengthening their bottom line and have innovative ways of doing things that actually can help them navigate through those difficult economic times. I speak about that in my first book. So anyway, I think I probably overspoken my time, but that would be my response to that question.
Thank you, Kelly, very much. With time, we are still okay. I believe there are very important things that you said, and unfortunately, we are seeing this rollback. And when we were designing the course, we had the idea, but we hadn't a clue what it is going to achieve and how. And I'm very lucky to have here today with us also a person who actually had the opportunity to learn from the wide range of perspectives and cases and forms of knowledge in our ForGEDI MOOC. And Philip Chambers is today with us as a learner of the course, but also he's currently one of the deputy coordinators of our task force. So, Philip, you completed our course, and looking back, I was wondering, what was the most significant shift in how you understand the concepts of gender, diversity, and inclusion in forestry, and did it influence how you work and function?
Hi, thanks. Hello, everyone. Hi. Yeah, I just want to preface this by saying I'm a bit sick just now, so if I sound rough, it's because I am. So my apologies for that. I was just reflecting on taking the course there. And I went through it again to just refamiliarize myself with it because there's the way that the course is structured is that you have to actively give comment and reflect, and I think that the way that it was structured really at the time allowed me to reflect, and it was good to go back and reflect. At that reminded me that it was almost 2 years ago when I took it, and it says it takes 3 weeks, but it actually took me 6 months because life is busy, but it was really worthwhile to do. I really enjoyed the flexibility that it provided as well, that you could fit it in around your life because everybody's lives are busy. It allowed me to reflect on the different types of forestries that there are. I think we talk about forestry, and I think actually what we're talking about multiple forestries. We have different contexts, different urban forestry, community forestry, different governance systems and structures throughout the world, and indigenous forestry, and there's so many different perspectives there, and the case studies were really good in there to sort of bring that to life and make me realize that the world is very complex, and the perspectives and therefore the barriers that are affecting people in all of those different forestries are multiple and varied and difficult to just it brought that to my attention, shall we say. Anyway, whilst doing the course, I had the chance to reflect on the fact that I actually started my forestry career in Scotland with multiple female foresters. And I didn't realize that at the time that this was actually maybe quite an unusual situation. But because of that, some of this, I didn't maybe see the barriers that were there that they were facing. and they were just my colleagues, and maybe I see myself as being, a fairly liberal in some respects that I maybe wasn't fully aware. So I think the course really helped open my eyes, put terms to things that I wasn't fully aware of. But also to be able to share within the course some of those women that I worked with, their experiences in their lives, and the fact that some of them are still to this day a great inspiration for me. I was, grateful that the course allowed me to share my perspectives on those women, and also what I learned from them, and also to have been presented with these tools. We just heard from Kelly. The one that had the most impact on me was actually the ally ladder. It got me to stop and actually think and realize that, oh, I'm actually not as far along that ladder as I thought I was. I thought I was maybe further along, but I'm reading the comment just now that I was only at maybe number 5 along that ladder, and maybe because of that, it motivated me to get involved with the ForGEDI task force and to try to help out in any way that I could. So I felt that I have a background in some communication, so I got involved in the communication stream of the ForGEDI task force, and we welcome anyone who wants to come and get involved with the ForGEDI task force, please do. But it affected my work because my research is in forest planning and more recently in gamification and digital tools, and so we set up a Nordic Forest Research annual network called the Play Fair Forest Network, where we look at digital tools in forestry and how they're used and applied, and actually who benefits from those tools, but who loses out. So I'm actually actively looking at inclusion within my research now also. And I got involved with university structures in GEDI, related university structures too. But the final point I'll make is that, and I think Kelly touched upon this as well, is that, and I mentioned it in a few comments throughout the course, because it dawned on me as I took the course that actually, whilst this is going to be great for sort of educating the leaders of the future in forestry, in science and in practice, actually what we need is to try and get this course taken by people in industry and in positions of leadership now in education and in science. And I think it would open their eyes. I think they'd start to realize that they could be part of the change as well. And they may be part of the problem and not realize it. So yeah, I think that the course is quite powerful, and I'm very grateful to have taken it, and the way that it's shaped my life I'm very, very grateful. So thank you to all of you creators and the earlier task force.
Thank you very much, Philip. It's really amazing to hear from somebody who took the course. Of course, we, as moderators of the course, we can read the comments, but still it's always different when you hear somebody who can actually share how the whole course influenced and what they found valuable. I want to thank you all for your reflections and also being aware of the time that we dedicated to this webinar. Wanting to share with you that I believe that what we heard today is all related to acting upon knowledge, different types of knowledge, acknowledging them, and having collaborative action that is needed to change the institutions. With that said, it would be very good to know that we started with the idea of creating the course, but over the course of years, we actually evolved into something bigger, and we are continuing our efforts through the ForGEDI UFRO task force that was actually officially launched in 2024. Just a second, as I would like to share the few last slides. I'm happy to share that the task force is continuing also with the management of our ForGEDI MOOC, and thanks to the Nordic Research Council, who is kindly funding our one more year of free full open access. As we slowly closing our webinar, I would just like to share with you that after the webinar completes, a short post-event survey will open. And it is very few questions. We would like to ask your feedback. as that could help us share the future of our initiative and upcoming events. I would like also to use the opportunity to thank each person who supported the MOOC, each organization with their not just contributor, but also staff such as professors, technicians, and different offices, as well as all the learners and task force members. After this webinar, we are continuing with a 1-hour internal task force meeting. So I invite members who are now attending webinar to use the private link that was shared with them. With this, I believe that we have still a few minutes for open questions or comments, either from audience or panelists. So I see no open question in question and answer session. Anybody else would like to reflect? Susanne, yes, please.
Can I
Okay.
just make a question?
Yes, Laura, please go ahead and then we can hear from Susanne.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this anniversary and for sharing the thoughts in the presentation and in the panelist visions. I had an idea when I was listening the keynote speech by Janette. I saw that there is this dominant approach of the men and the dictatorial approaches and paternalistic and patriarchic approaches that are dominant. We know that the trend is getting worse and worse worldwide, probably. I would like to get some good examples, some positive examples that we can be inspired by, where women are dominating the society and the dynamics in the society, to get some hope that we can really move in this direction and learn from them and try to integrate these in our societies that are nowadays very very harsh, very getting more and more difficulties, as also Kelly was mentioning in the North America, but that this is a general trend also in Europe. So any of you having positive examples that we can follow and we can get inspired by? Thank you. If I may, Todora and everyone, I mean, I think it's in the 2 minutes left, we can't say much, but I would think that, again, back to the indigenous peoples initiatives, you know, then we can sort of, if you look at for indigenous cultural landscapes and that idea that there's nothing that's pristine, and the way in which indigenous peoples' visions of their territories now really makes sense in a world of global heating. I think, you know, that's one. I mean, it allows us to, as many people have just said here, reframe how we think about forests. So again, I think for indigenous peoples, with thinking of ecocultural landscapes, that a forest is not just the trees we log, the species we log, but it's a source of food, of medicinals, of non-timber forest products, and sacrality and sacred spaces. And so I think there are many good examples in the world of IPCAs, indigenous protected and cultural landscapes, indigenous cultural landscapes, that are truly, I think, inspirational. But it doesn't matter which part of the world we're in, because we can reframe and rethink about, you know, what is a forest? It's so much more than trees. Well, everyone here knows that, but I think there are many concrete examples there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, for the answer, and Laura for a question, a tough one. We are sharply on time, so I would like to close this webinar as we have a meeting to continue. Thank you to all once more who joined us today and dedicated your time and attention. I kindly invite you to connect with us via our webpage, emails, or other channels if we are not yet in contact, and learn more about our task force and hopefully join us in future endeavors. Thank you all very much.